DC11 The Quest for the Bells. Soul-touching and life-enhancing stories. The Quest for the Bells. A Christmas story. Brad, or Brad the Brat, which was the nickname given to him, was a troubled kid. He was born in a nice family, lived in a beautiful mansion, and had every toy under the sun. Most of his toys, however, he received in a strange way, by throwing tantrums, and wanting to have them instantly. His parents didn't know what to do with Brad when he got so furious. They had tried everything, but in the end they had to give in, and giving him what he wanted. Brad had no patience whatsoever, didn't care about anybody or anything, and listening was something completely foreign to him. He was great in throwing tantrums and resisting, which was another difficult side of his personality. He had visited every school in town, but nobody had been able to handle him, and so he was homeschooled, which, by the way, also didn't work, because Brad had no interest in anything. Any method trying to get him to do things failed, and his parents had no idea what to try next. The incredible thing, however, with this all was that his parents stayed very loving, and with each challenging situation they were just sending out more love to him. They felt that this was the only thing they could do, and which helped them to go through these difficult times, waiting patiently for things to change. Brad had turned 7 years of age, and Christmas was around the corner. But just like any year before, Brad had no interest in this celebration, because he didn't believe in anything. When he wanted a toy, there was no need to wait for Christmas, Santa, his birthday, or any other celebration. He wanted it right now, otherwise he would throw a tantrum that nobody could handle. So he got what he wanted at any day of the year, without having to wait. His mother had put a Christmas stocking on the wooden beam over the fireplace, with Brad's name on it, but at the moment he saw it, he took it off and threw it in the garbage bin. His mother took a deep breath, and Brad left in an angry mood for his room. At the moment he entered his room, a ringing started in his ears, and it was so loud that he had to put his hands over them, which helped a little, but the ringing wouldn't stop. This was the beginning of another drama with Brad. Although he would not listen anyway, it was now very hard for Brad to hear anything other than the ringing that sounded like the ringing of bells in his ears. At least that was what he explained to physicians when his parents went with him to seek help to get rid of this ringing, which just didn't want to stop. Some doctors gave it the name of a disease, and a weird card reader told him that somebody had put a curse on Brad and had put a spell on him. They went for help everywhere, but nothing really worked. But in the meantime, something had changed in Brad, who was now unable to go into tantrums or arguments regarding the things he wanted or not. The ringing of the bells was too loud and took all his attention. It was Christmas Eve, and it was for the first time since years that Brad came out of his room to be with his parents in the living room. While sitting in between his parents in the big couch, which had not happened either, other than in the first years of his life, a voice spoke from far away in between the ringing of the bells, calling his name. Brad really needed to focus and concentrate to hear what the voice was saying, because the ringing of the bells was still very loud. "Hi, Brad. I know you do not believe in Santa or anything for that matter of fact, but when you are still willing to listen to me, I will make the noise of the bells less loud for you." Brad didn't have to think too long and answered, "Okay, I will listen to what you have to say." Brad's parents couldn't believe what they were hearing and thought he was talking to them. But when they asked him something, he didn't respond to them, but kept on having a conversation with somebody they couldn't see. "Dear Brad," continued the voice, with the loudness of the bell, when the loudness of the bell was decreasing, "the ringing of the bells is a very special gift for you, but you must find out where they are coming from. The greatest treasure, and even you cannot imagine how great this treasure is waiting for you to be discovered." This was the first time that something got his attention, and what made Brad curious. When you try to find out where the sound of the bells is coming from, you need to quiet your mind that distracts you with many thoughts. Repeat the following and keep repeating this in order to stay focused. On my quest for the ringing bells, breaking curses and many spells. As long as you keep on repeating this, the curse and the spell of distractions, thoughts, feelings and strange behaviors is broken, at least for those moments when you are busy with the spell breaker. And the longer you keep busy with it, the more you can change and the closer you're going to discover the treasure. You cannot ask me for any other clues. You just need to do as I told you. And our discussion is over for the moment. Merry Christmas, Brad, and enjoy the quest for the bells. Not really sure what had happened, but happy that the ringing was not so loud anymore, he looked in the eyes of his parents and said, "Merry Christmas." He went up to them and gave them a big hug, and they had no idea what was happening with Brad. "With whom were you just talking before, Brad?" asked his dad. "With nobody, just a dream." There were no further questions asked, but they had a nice celebration together, and when his parents had gone to bed later that night, they hugged each other and stated that this had been a very, very special evening. Things were finally changing after many years of struggle and waiting. The following year things became easier, and although he didn't show interest in anything and still didn't want to do his homework, at least there were no tantrums anymore. It was also different from that evening onward that Brad didn't left for his room just in anger, but he did spend a lot of time in it without his parents knowing what he was doing. His parents had at times looked through the keyhole in the door to see if Brad was okay. They saw him sitting on a pillow with his eyes closed and legs crossed, and often for hours in a row. Something inside had moved him, and Brad was on a quest to find out where the ringing sound of the bells was coming from. Every day, and even during the night, Brad was fully awake and sitting for hours looking inside the darkness and trying to find out where the sound of the bells was coming from. He often got mad at himself losing concentration, but his longing for the quest, listening to the bells and repeating the spell breaker, kept him going. His life with his parents and even with some friends who returned in his life changed over time. Brad was not so impatient anymore, resisted less, and was even pleasant at times. The deep longing inside him, trying to find out where the sound of the bells was coming from, had a great positive effect on Brad. And he also didn't ask for new toys anymore and seemed to be more content. The only time when Brad got upset was when his parents wanted to visit some new healthcare practitioner that had started their business in town. He made it very clear that he didn't want to get rid of the ringing of the bells, and the parents left it at that. They thought that when the ringing would be gone in his ears, that he would start to read and learn a little. Brad had fallen in love with the sound of the bells that started to sound so sweet to him and which brought him some inner peace. It was the following Christmas evening, when he was sitting with his parents again like the year before, when the voice entered his mind and Brad asked, "Are you really Santa?" The answer was, I could say yes, but you don't know until you see me, and even then. How would you know if I'm really Santa? But let's forget this all for the moment, Brad. You are doing well by breaking your own spell of being a very challenging kid, being disrespectful, impatient, furious and angry, and always resisting. I like that you are persisting in your quest, and this quality of persisting, I would want to see this as well from now on in your sport activities and in all your homeschooling subjects. And when you succeed, I will come again and give you more help in succeeding in your quest. I can bargain with you, Brad, because I know that your longing to find the great treasure is something you really want. You know that there is something that will give you more pleasure than all the toys you have ever received. I know you have fallen in love with the sound. The ringing of the bells will be reduced to only 2.5 hours early in the morning, and this is the only time you can continue listening to them. The rest of the day is to do your other work well in the world. Be caring, assisting, and start showing interest in learning. You have done well with repeating the spell breaker, and this time I give you the second part of this magic, and keep repeating it. On my quest for the ringing bells, breaking curses and many spells, wandering in the darkness, but not so far, discovering Santa's star. Brad's life in the world changed for the better, and during the morning hours he was on his inner quest, searching for the bells. At times when he was sitting in the darkness inside his mind, and keeping all his thought away by using the spell breaker, and by listening to the sound of the bells, he often saw the flickering of little stars. All of this kept him going until the next Christmas arrived. Sitting in front of the fireplace after a nice Christmas dinner with his parents and sharing many beautiful and wonderful stories, the special voice started to speak again. Well done, Brad, and I think you deserve some more help in your quest for the sounds of the bells. Watch this. Slowly, the darkness inside of him disappeared, and it was as if a sunrise appeared and started to light up everything around him. To his great surprise, he saw Santa right in front of him, sitting in his sleigh, and then he looked at the entire universe, covered with endless planets and uncountable stars. Without any doubt, Brad pointed with his finger to the North Pole star and said, "That's where the sound of the bells is coming from." Brad stepped into the sleigh and gave Santa a big hug. "Are you ready to discover your treasure, Brad?" Off they went with the speed of light, direction North Pole star. When they entered the North Pole star through the surrounding atmosphere, the sound of the bells became more distinct and more beautiful than ever before. Then, from the distance, Brad could see that on the entire North Pole star, which was completely dressed up with Christmas decorations, all the elves were standing outside their homes, holding Christmas bells in their hands and moving them. All the reindeer were shaking their necks which held bells, and all the decorated Christmas trees with bells inside were dancing and ringing with the soft wind coming from the north. We all have been taking turns, so you would keep searching for the bells, because we knew that you were not happy on the earth plane. Before Santa could say more, Brad said, "Santa, why is it that everything here looks so familiar to me?" "That's just what I wanted to talk about. Brad, once you were an elf, and living here amongst us. But you were never content, rebellious, and it was not easy for you to listen and to follow. You had this wish on your mind to not be an elf anymore, and wanted to live amongst the people of the world. We had many talks, but in the end, I granted you your wish. You went to the planet Earth and were born in a nice, loving family, but it didn't take too long before your way of behavior returned again. Somewhere you realized that living on Earth was much harder than living here in the North Pole Star, and deep underneath you got the illness called being homesick, and you started to rebel even more, and even without knowing this. In the meantime, Santa had landed the sleigh and everybody came up running to Brad, welcoming him and wanting to give him hugs. When he stepped out of the sleigh, he noticed that he was walking differently and looked with one eye into the windows of a house and saw that he had changed back into Brad the elf. Brad looked at Santa and said, "That explains everything, and thank you for bringing me home again." "You can thank everybody, because everybody helped, and we are all happy to have you back, and back with a different attitude." They celebrated Christmas together, and then it was time for Brad to return to Earth. And before he could argue about it, Santa said, "Brad, you have to finish your adventure on Earth, which was a wish I granted you, and you will have to go through it. Know, however, that you can visit your home here at the North Pole Star every morning for 2.5 hours, and after your physical life on Earth is over, you can come back here to live with us forever." Brad returned to Earth, changed back into the boy Brad, and from that day on excelled in everything what he did, and even became an example to others. Every morning he visited home in a world where time doesn't exist, and which felt like being there for days in those 2.5 hours. Brad learned to see the adventure in everything. The magic returned completely, and he lived a long and healthy life before he finally returned back to the North Pole Star as Brad the little elf, and to live happily ever after. What the story could bring us. Are we not all magical elves? Crystal children of light, souls, or any other name you wanted to give that to that real essence inside of you? But for the moment in disguise, hidden inside a human body on an adventure on the planet Earth. When we forget this very important fact, we lose the magic and the real drive for adventure in wanting to learn, to discover, and to experience new things. When we lose faith and stop believing in true magic, which is the magic of our soul, life becomes very hard, and in order to bear that pain, we seek distractions and pleasure in the world, which gives us even more problems. When we are able to turn our resisting, and we all resist many things, from just being thankful and content to having to learn and even resisting the changing of our boring patterns, how we eat and think, into persisting, we all can accomplish great things. The soul within us is not completely happy because we have forgotten that we are souls being on a momentary adventure on the planet Earth. We have put a spell onto ourselves because we let the mind do what it wants. And this needs to be broken and it is our individual life adventure to find a spellbreaker.